Hey dudes, dudettes, and noodles. There's a lot of talk about critique on the internet, especially in the art community, and since the filming for my video essay is still coming along at a snail's pace, I decided I might as well set aside some time to quickly get out the thoughts I have on it. The consensus of the art community discourse seems to be that critique is really, really important for improving artistically. There are a few different versions of this take, and I want to talk about a few of them, going from the least to most intense, and then give my own take. Version 1. Critique can be helpful because it provides an alternate perspective. Sometimes you've been looking at your stuff too long, and you can tell that something is wrong with it, but you can no longer tell what it is. In cases like this, as in most cases, critique can be very helpful for getting a second pair of eyes to take a fresh look at your work without being bogged down by staring at it for hours. You might even find that the problem was entirely in your head. This is basically my point of view. I see it as the most chill version. I'll get a little bit more into this later. Version 2. You should be able to accept respectful critique. This one is very similar to the last one, but it has an important distinction. This version says, if you want to be respected as an artist, taking respectful critique is a big part of that. I see this point of view a lot. It's the one that criticizes artists by saying things like, this grown adult can't even take very mild criticism, and things like that. I understand where people who think like this are coming from. I really think they're trying to help. The issue I take with this approach is that getting critique, especially unprompted critique, even if it's peak politeness, can really hurt. This is particularly true if you have a history of being unfairly criticized, but even for most people, I think it's true. And this approach doesn't really respect that. Something you may or may not know about me is that on top of doing YouTube and art and stuff, I also write fanfiction. Link to my fanfiction.net in the description, by the way. The first fic I posted was a Harry Potter fanfiction about my OC. Oh god, it's so bad, please don't read it. Anyway, it got this one long-ish comment criticizing the pacing and the story beats, and it was very polite and great and correct and stuff, but it didn't change the fact that it hurt and made me feel really embarrassed, and that's a perfectly normal reaction to criticism. It's important to not take it out on the critic, of course, but any emotional response you have is fine and normal, even the unhealthy ones. We need to be more aware of our feelings. If you shame people for reacting to something in an unhealthy way, you make it more difficult for people to recognize those unhealthy reactions in themselves, which isn't great because unhealthy reactions are very, very common. We need, as a society, to learn how to think through and work through our emotions. We need to be able to react to people displaying unhealthy emotions in a way that's healthy and safe for all parties involved. I don't know exactly what that is, I'm not a psychologist, but I know it isn't telling a person in emotional distress to just learn to take respectful critique. Version 3. Even if the critique is rude, you should be able to look past the tone and try to get something useful out of it. This is kind of just an extension of the last one, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I felt that the difference was worth mentioning. These people take it a step further and say that people shouldn't whine about rude comments and just pretend it was polite so that they can take the totally super useful advice because, as we all know, advice fueled by contempt, ridicule, and general mean-spiritedness could never be skewed or misleading at all, and is therefore a wonderful source for how to improve as an artist. Basically, just take what I said for version 2, but add an exasperated eye roll. Version 4. You have a moral responsibility to accept critique. Arguments for morality are often prone to annoying the crap out of me, not in small part because people often don't realize they're making them. To a certain extent, version 2 fits into this category. It's basically the expectation that a person be completely accepting of critique for the purpose of portraying some key personal value. Version 4 differentiates itself by erasing all illusions of caring whether or not the advice is wanted. It's a question of must rather than should, or perhaps more precisely, of morality rather than ability. To these people, not accepting critique isn't just weak, it's a moral failing. You see this in media criticism a lot. People who want to pretend that their dislike of the writing in Captain Marvel is a moral crusade. The conversation is ironically also usually heavily steeped in sexism for these specific people, so that's fun. Anyway, it doesn't help that version 4 people generally use the phrase accept critique to mean accept critique as true. PSA, you can find critique helpful and also genuinely disagree with a piece of critique and not want to implement it into your work. And message to all fans of anyone out there, public figures do not owe it to you to agree with you and change their work. A public figure disagreeing with your criticism does not mean that they can't take criticism. Version 5. You have a moral responsibility to accept any treatment on the internet. This is a trash argument that I see popping up all over the place. People who make this argument usually try to say it's based on free speech, but it's also an argument I've primarily seen used by crypto-fascists. Funny how that works. Anyway, the right to free speech does not give you the right to a megaphone. If you see a comment on your platform that you don't want to be there, feel free to delete it. It's fine. You don't need to let negativity into your life. And make sure to report people who send you death threats, try to dox you, etc. Anyway, this argument is also sometimes based on the idea that the internet is an inherently negative place, and that is patently false. Each of us can work to make the internet a friendlier place through our own interactions. Human nature is fluid and can change, but if we behave as though it's static, it will be. That was needlessly deep. Here's my conclusion. The takeaway is this. Critique can be helpful, as it gives you a second pair of eyes. That was weird phrasing. You, under no circumstances, are required to take critique. If you explicitly ask to not get critique and people give it anyway, there's nothing wrong with deleting it, as long as it was made on your own platform. Or just ignoring it if that's what you want. Live your own life. Take the advice you want and throw out what you don't. You owe your energy to no neckbeard. Thanks for watching, and please consider checking out my Etsy, Redbubble, and social media, all of which are in the description.